You think this family runs on feelings, Laura? It runs on decisions. And your brother has been making the right ones while you've been off chasing whatever it is you do. Your aunt and I have already handled the paperwork. All that's left is your signature on the transfer. Stop acting like this is a surprise. If you walk out of this room without signing, don't expect me to explain to the partners why the company is suddenly missing its most stable shareholder. You'll be the one they blame. Hi, my name is Olivia Parker. I am 35 years old. The words landed like ice water down my back on the wide cedar deck of the Highline Ridge retreat. We were supposed to be there for 3 days of family alignment meetings about the future of the adventure tour company my grandfather had built in the Colorado Rockies. Instead, my mother had turned the first morning into a public audit of my loyalty. I kept my hands flat on the table so no one could see them shake. My brother Ethan sat 2 seats down, scrolling through his phone like none of this concerned him. My Aunt Linda, my mother's younger sister, sat on my mother's other side, with a thin folder already open in front of her, the edges of legal documents peeking out. The morning sun hit the snow-dusted peaks behind them, but the air on the deck felt thin and sharp. I had flown in the night before, thinking this was finally going to be the weekend we stopped pretending everything was fine. The company had been under pressure for 2 years, rising insurance costs, a bad season of wildfires that canceled half our bookings, and quiet rumors that some of the private investors were getting nervous. My mother had called the retreat necessary and booked the largest suite block. I had told myself it was a chance to reset. Now, the reset was happening on her terms. She pushed the folder an inch closer to me. The partners are arriving tomorrow morning. They want to see a unified front and a clean ownership structure before they commit more capital. Ethan is ready to step into the operational lead. You've always said you didn't want the day-to-day headache anyway. I looked at the top page. It was a stock transfer agreement moving 22% of the company's shares, my grandfather's original stake that had passed to me, into a new LLC Ethan controlled. The language was clean, almost gentle. No mention of the private account statements I had found folded inside a resort housekeeping binder 2 nights earlier when I was looking for extra towels in Ethan's room. Those statements showed regular transfers from the company operating account into something labeled only EP Personal Reserve. The amounts were small enough to miss in normal bookkeeping, large enough to add up to serious money over 18 months. My Aunt Linda cleared her throat. It's really the cleanest path forward, Olivia. Your mother and I have been over every line. This protects everyone. I kept my voice even. Including the partners who don't know about the reserve account yet? The silence that followed was short but loud. Ethan finally looked up from his phone. My mother's mouth tightened at the corners the way it always did when she was deciding whether to lie or to double down. She chose double down. You always find a way to make everything about suspicion, she said, voice low and tight. That account is for emergencies the partners don't need to see. Ethan has been the one here every week, keeping the guides paid and the insurance current while you were in Denver building your little consulting thing. You want credit without the work. That ends today. I felt the old familiar drop in my stomach. The same one I used to get when I was 16, and she would announce at dinner that Ethan needed the car for real responsibilities, while I was told to take the bus. The difference now was that I was 35, and the stakes were written in legal ink instead of curfew arguments. I stood up slowly. I'm not signing anything until I've had my own attorney look at it. My mother laughed once, short and ugly. Of course you are. Because if you don't, I will tell every partner at breakfast tomorrow exactly why the company has been bleeding cash for the last 1.5 years. And I will make sure they know whose name is on the decisions that got us here. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The threat sat between us like a live wire. I walked off the deck without answering. Behind me, I heard my aunt say something soft and placating to my mother. The same tone she had used for 20 years whenever my mother decided someone in the family needed to be brought back into line. The path down to my cabin cut through pine trees still wet from last night's rain. My boots slipped once on the needles. I didn't catch myself on the railing. I just kept walking, the folder still in my hand, the edges biting into my palm. Halfway down, I stopped and opened it again. The transfer pages were there, but so was something else my aunt must have slipped in by mistake. Or maybe she had meant for me to see it. A single printed bank statement from 3 months ago showing a $70,000 wire from the company account to EP Personal Reserve, with the memo line, Q3 Operational Buffer. I folded the statement and slid it into my jacket pocket. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped the moment I realized they had not just asked me to step back. They had already moved the money and were simply asking me to make it legal after the fact. I reached my cabin, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. Outside the window, the mountain kept doing what mountains do, existing unmoved by any of this. Inside, everything I thought I still had with my family was shifting under my feet. I pulled out my phone and opened a new message to Sophia Lang, the one person outside the family who had been in the company long enough to know the books almost as well as I did. She had started as a guide and now ran the booking system and vendor contracts. We had become friends the slow way, shared late-night spreadsheets and quiet complaints about how decisions were made. I typed, "Found something. Can you meet me at the lower trailhead in 20 minutes? Don't tell anyone." She replied in under a minute, "On my way. Everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just changed into hiking boots, zipped the folder and the folded statement into my jacket, and stepped back outside. The air smelled like wet pine and cold stone. Somewhere above me on the main deck, I could still hear voices. My mother's rising and falling in that controlled, reasonable tone she used when she wanted everyone to believe she was the only adult in the room. I started down the trail. Behind me, the luxury retreat kept its perfect, expensive silence. Ahead of me, the path dropped toward the creek and the small clearing where staff sometimes met to talk, without guests overhearing. I didn't know yet what Sophia would say when she saw the numbers. I didn't know if Thomas Gray, the largest outside partner, would still take my mother's calls once the reserve account came to light. I only knew that the 3 lines my mother had spoken on the deck had made something final click into place. She had drawn the line. Now I had to decide which side of it I was willing to stand on. The trail opened into the small clearing by the creek. Sophia was already there, leaning against a fallen log with her arms crossed. She straightened when she saw me and didn't waste time on small talk. I handed her the folded statement without preamble. She read it once, then again slower the second time. Her mouth tightened. "These aren't in the books, I see," she said. Her voice stayed low. "The operating account shows the wires, but they're coded as vendor payments. I never approved anything to an EP Personal Reserve." She pulled out her phone and opened a spreadsheet she kept offline. Her finger traced a column. 70,000 3 months ago. Another 42 in January. Smaller ones before that. It started right after the insurance renewal, when your mother took over the wire approvals from the bookkeeper. I kept my breathing even. My mother told me it was for emergencies the partners didn't need to see. Sophia looked up. "Then why is it going to an LLC?" "Ethan set up last year. I pulled the formation docs last week when I was cleaning old vendor files. Your Aunt Linda is listed as the registered agent." That landed harder than I expected. My aunt had handled the legal side for years, but this was new. Sophia kept scrolling. "There's more in the vendor folder from last quarter. Invoices from a consulting firm that doesn't exist on our approved list. Same address as Ethan's LLC. Your mother signed off on every one. I took the phone and read the names. The amounts were smaller, but they added up. My mother hadn't just moved money quietly. She had built a parallel trail that pointed straight at my brother while keeping her own name off the direct transfers. Sophia took the phone back. If Thomas Gray sees this before the partners' meeting tomorrow, he's going to pull his additional investment. He already asked me last month why the cash position looked weaker than the reports your mother sent him. I nodded once. Don't say anything to anyone yet. I need copies of everything you have. She didn't argue. She just forwarded the files to a new encrypted folder we both used and handed me the phone. Be careful. Your mother called me this morning asking if I had seen you. She sounded like she already knew you weren't going to sign. I slipped the phone into my pocket. She drew the line on the deck. I'm on the other side of it now. Sophia gave a short, humorless laugh. Then she's going to make sure everyone else knows it before breakfast. We split up without another word. She headed back toward the staff cabins. I took the longer loop that brought me around to the main lodge from the side. I needed time to think before I walked back into whatever my mother had planned next. The lodge lobby was quiet when I stepped inside. Most guests were still at dinner or on the evening snowshoe walk the resort ran for paying customers. I was halfway to the elevator when my Aunt Linda appeared from the small library off the main hall. She must have been waiting. "Olivia," she said, voice soft and careful. "Your mother is looking for you. She wants to finish the conversation before the partners arrive in the morning." I stopped, but didn't turn fully toward her. "You mean she wants the signature?" My aunt stepped closer. She glanced once toward the empty hallway behind her. "It would be easier for everyone if you just signed. Ethan has been carrying more than his share for months. The reserve account was his idea, but your mother made it happen because she didn't want the partners questioning every expense while the company is this fragile." I looked at her then. "You set up the LLC for him." She didn't deny it. "He asked me to keep it simple. Your mother said it was temporary, just until the next round of funding closed. She didn't want you pulled into the details because you've been distant." "Distant," I repeated. The word tasted flat. "That's what she's calling it." My aunt's expression flickered. For a second, she looked tired instead of composed. "She's scared, Olivia. The last 2 seasons nearly broke the company. Ethan stepped up when you were building your own work. She sees this as protecting what your grandfather started." I didn't answer. I just walked past her toward the elevator. She didn't follow. My cabin was on the 2nd floor of the smaller wing. The door was unlocked when I reached it. My mother was already inside, standing by the window with her arms crossed. She didn't look surprised to see me. She turned as the door clicked shut. "You went to Sophia. I assume she showed you whatever she thinks she found." I stayed near the door. She showed me the transfers. "And the fake vendor invoices." My mother's mouth curved in that thin, familiar way. "Sophia has always been loyal to whoever pays her last. You should remember that before you decide who to trust." "She works for the company," I said. "Not for you personally." My mother stepped away from the window. "The company is me right now, Laura. Your brother understands that. He shows up. He signs what needs signing. He doesn't run to outside people the second something looks inconvenient." She used my old nickname on purpose. It landed exactly as she intended. I kept my voice level. "The partners arrive tomorrow. If they see those numbers before I've had a chance to explain them, they won't just pull new money. They'll want explanations that lead straight back to you and Ethan." She laughed once, short and sharp. "Explanations. That's what you're good at. Explaining why you were never here when it mattered. Explaining why your consulting work is more important than the family that paid for your degree. Explaining why you deserve a voice now after years of silence." She moved closer. Her tone dropped the sarcasm, turning colder. "Ethan didn't need explanations. He just did the work. And when the insurance almost canceled us last winter, he found the money to keep the guides paid. You were in Denver negotiating your own contracts. Don't stand there and act like you've been carrying anything. I felt the old pressure in my chest, the same one that used to make me back down at family dinners. This time, I stayed where I was. I'm not signing the transfer, I said. My mother's eyes narrowed. Then I will tell Thomas Gray exactly why the cash has been moving the way it has. And I will make sure he understands that you are the one creating the instability right before the meeting that decides whether we survive the next year. She turned toward the door, then stopped with her hand on the knob. You have until breakfast. After that, the partners will hear my version first. And they will believe it, because I have been the one answering their calls while you were busy with your own life. She left without waiting for an answer. The door closed behind her with a soft, final click. I stood in the middle of the cabin for a long moment. The folder with the transfer papers still sat on the small table where I had left it earlier. I picked it up, flipped through the pages once more, then slid the entire thing into the resort's complimentary laundry bag and zipped it shut. I wasn't signing it. I wasn't leaving it where she could claim I had agreed. My phone buzzed. A text from Sophia. Thomas Gray just checked in early. He's in the lobby asking for your mother. She and your aunt went down to meet him. I read it twice. Then I changed into a clean sweater, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the stairs instead of the elevator. The lobby would be the worst place for a scene, but I needed to see what version of the story my mother was already telling. Halfway down the main staircase, I heard voices rising from the seating area near the fireplace. My mother's tone was calm and reasonable. Thomas Gray's was not. I stopped on the landing where the stairs turned out of sight, but close enough to hear. And I'm telling you, the reserve was necessary, my mother was saying. Ethan has been managing it directly because Olivia has made it clear she doesn't want operational involvement. We were protecting her from the stress. Thomas's voice cut through. Protecting her or keeping her in the dark? Because the numbers I saw this afternoon don't match the reports you sent last month. And if Ethan's LLC is receiving company funds without board approval, that's not protection. That's a problem. My Aunt Linda murmured something I couldn't catch. My mother answered louder. Olivia has always been difficult about family decisions. She'll come around once she understands the alternative. We don't need to involve the entire partner group in what is essentially an internal reallocation. Thomas didn't raise his voice, but the edge in it carried. Internal reallocation stops being internal when it affects my investment. I want to speak to Olivia before tomorrow's meeting. If she's not willing to sign whatever you've put in front of her, I need to hear why directly from her. I stayed frozen on the landing. Below me, the conversation continued in lower tones. My mother was already spinning the narrative that I was the unstable one, the one who had checked out. Thomas was pushing back, but he was only hearing one side so far. My phone buzzed again in my pocket. Another text from Sophia. Thomas just asked the front desk for your cabin number. He's heading your way in a minute. I turned and went back up the stairs 2 at a time. I didn't want the conversation to happen in the lobby, where my mother could walk in and turn it into another performance. My cabin was still unlocked. I left the door open a few inches and waited by the window. Thomas Gray knocked once, then stepped inside when he saw me. He was in his late 50s, still in the same wool coat he wore to every meeting. He didn't sit. Your mother says you're refusing to sign the ownership transfer, he said without preamble. She also says the reserve account was your brother's idea to cover shortfalls you weren't around to help fix. I met his eyes. The reserve account received $70,000 3 months ago, and another $42,000 in January. Both wires were coded as vendor payments. The vendor invoices trace back to an LLC my brother controls. My aunt set it up. My mother approved every transfer. Thomas was quiet for 3 full seconds. Then he said, "Do you have the statements?" I handed him the folded pages Sophia had given me. He read them, standing up. When he finished, he folded them again and slipped them into his own coat pocket. "I'm moving my morning flight up," he said. "The other partners will be here by 9. I want you in the conference room at 8:30 with whatever documentation you have. If your mother wants to present her version, she can do it with you in the room." He turned to leave, then paused at the door. "She's betting you'll fold before breakfast, because that's what you've done before. Don't." The door closed behind him. I stood in the sudden quiet of the cabin and listened to his footsteps fade down the hall. Outside the window, the mountain was dark now. The only light came from the lodge windows and the string lights along the paths. Somewhere in one of the larger suites, my mother was probably already on the phone with Ethan or the bookkeeper, adjusting the story she would tell in the morning. I pulled out my phone and opened the encrypted folder Sophia had sent. I copied the files to a second drive I kept in my bag, then sent a short message to the attorney I used for my own consulting contracts. I didn't explain everything. I just wrote, "Family company issue. Need review of ownership transfers and wire approvals by 8 a.m. tomorrow. Will pay rush rate." She replied in under 10 minutes. "Send what you have. I'll clear the morning." I zipped the drive into my bag and set it on the chair by the door. Then I sat on the edge of the bed and waited for the next move. It came faster than I expected. A soft knock, then my mother's voice from the hallway, low and controlled. "Olivia, open the door. Thomas just left my suite. We need to talk before this gets worse." I didn't move right away. The knock came again, sharper. "I know you're in there. Don't make me have this conversation through the door in front of anyone who walks by." I stood up, crossed the room, and opened the door just enough to see her face. She looked tired under the hallway light, but the set of her mouth hadn't changed. She stepped forward as if she expected me to let her in. I didn't. "You went to Thomas," she said. It wasn't a question. "He came to me," I answered. "After he heard your version." My mother's eyes flicked past me into the cabin, then back to my face. "You're going to regret involving outsiders before we've had a chance to settle this as a family." I kept my hand on the door. "We stopped being able to settle anything as a family the moment you and my aunt started moving money without telling me." She leaned in slightly. Her voice dropped to the tone she used when she wanted to make sure every word landed. "Ethan is my son. He has been here. He has earned the position I'm giving him. You have earned exactly what you've taken, nothing more. If you walk into that meeting tomorrow and contradict me in front of the partners, you will not just lose your shares. You will lose any claim to this family at all. I will make sure of it." She straightened. "You have until 7:30. After that, I stop asking." She turned and walked back down the hall without waiting for an answer. Her heels clicked once on the hardwood, then faded. I closed the door and locked it. The cabin felt smaller than it had 10 minutes earlier. The bag with the drive sat on the chair like a weight I had chosen to carry. Outside, the wind had picked up. It moved through the pine trees with a low, constant sound that almost covered the distant hum of the lodge generators. I sat back down on the edge of the bed and stared at the phone in my hand. Thomas was already moving his flight. My attorney was clearing her morning. My mother had just drawn another line, this one sharper than the first. The partners would be here in less than 12 hours. Whatever happened in that conference room would decide more than shares. It would decide whether the version of the family my mother had built could survive the truth coming out in the open. I set the phone on the nightstand and lay back without turning off the light. Sleep wasn't going to come easily, but I didn't need it yet. I needed to be ready when the sun came up, and the next set of lines got drawn. The night passed in fragments. I lay on the bed with the light on, running through every possible version of the morning. Around 3, I got up and walked the empty paths around the lodge until the cold forced me back inside. By 6, I was dressed, the drive with the statements in my bag, and my attorney, Claire Voss, on standby with the files I had sent her at dawn. I reached the conference room at 8:20. Thomas Gray was already there with James Holt and Robert Ellis. My mother and my Aunt Linda Moore sat at the far end of the table. Ethan stood by the window again, the same defensive posture from the night before. No one looked like they had slept. Thomas nodded toward the empty seat across from my mother. "We're ready." My mother spoke first. She kept her voice steady and reasonable, the same tone she had used on the deck. She described the reserve account as a necessary buffer for operational shortfalls, framed Ethan as the only family member willing to carry the weight, and painted me as someone who had checked out years ago and was now inserting myself at the worst possible moment out of resentment. Ethan added short, clipped sentences about keeping the lights on and not having the luxury of outside opinions. Then Thomas turned to me. I placed the statements and the LLC formation documents in the center of the table. The reserve received $112,000 over 6 months. Every wire was coded as a vendor payment to a company that never provided services. The LLC belongs to Ethan. My aunt set it up at my mother's direction. I slid the pages toward Thomas. James Holt read them first, then passed them to Robert Ellis. The silence stretched. Thomas looked at my mother. "You told me this was internal. This bypassed every approval process we have." My mother's calm finally cracked. "It was temporary. The company needed liquidity after the insurance crisis. Ethan managed it because Olivia was not here." Ethan pushed off the window. "You weren't here when the guides almost walked. You were in Denver building your consulting business while we kept this place alive. Now you show up with paperwork and act like you're the one protecting the family." I stayed seated. I didn't need to be here every day to see that the money went to an account you control, or that the invoices were created after the fact to hide the transfers. My Aunt Linda spoke, her voice thinner than I had ever heard it. "It was supposed to be short-term. Your mother said once the new investment closed, we would disclose everything properly." Robert Ellis set the papers down. "The new investment is not closing if the partners believe the books were altered without disclosure. And right now, that is exactly what this shows." The room fractured from there. Voices overlapped. Ethan defended the transfers as necessary. My mother accused me of trying to destroy what my grandfather built because I had always felt like the outsider. James Holt demanded a timeline of every approval. Robert Ellis said he wanted an independent audit by the end of the week. My mother turned on me directly then, the last layer of control gone.
"You have always done this,"
she said, voice low and vicious.
"Waited until everyone else did the work and then stepped in to make yourself look necessary. Your brother stayed. He signed what needed signing. He didn't run to outsiders the second something looked inconvenient. You earned exactly the place you have now on the outside." I met her eyes. "I earned the right to know where the money went. That is all I am asking for." Thomas ended it before anyone could answer. "Effective immediately, all wires over $10,000 require dual board approval. Olivia remains a full shareholder with access to every account. Ethan and Diane, you are both on administrative leave pending the forensic review. We will have the auditors here by tomorrow morning." My mother stood so fast her chair hit the wall. "You cannot remove me from my own company." Thomas did not raise his voice. "It stopped being only your company the moment outside capital entered.
and it stopped being honest the moment you hid transfers from the board. She looked at me across the table. The fury in her face was no longer controlled. "You did this," she said. "You brought them in. You broke what was left of this family." I stood as well. "You broke it when you decided I did not deserve to know where the money was going." She walked out without another word. My aunt followed. Ethan stayed a moment longer, staring at the table, then left without looking at me. Thomas stayed with the remaining partners. "We will need the full review," he said to me, "but based on what you brought, you are clear. The shares stay yours. If the audit confirms the pattern, your mother and brother will have very few options left." I nodded. "Thank you for hearing both sides." He gave a short nod. "Your mother counted on you backing down. She miscalculated." The rest of the day moved in pieces. The auditors arrived by mid-afternoon. Sophia pulled every file they requested and stayed in the small office with me while they worked. By evening, the lodge felt hollowed out. Staff moved quietly. Guests who had come for the weekend kept to their cabins. I finished packing just after 7. When I opened the cabin door, my mother was standing on the path. She did not come closer. "You have taken everything from your brother," she said. "I hope you are satisfied." I set the bag down. I did not take anything. I stopped the transfers from staying hidden. Her mouth tightened. "He was the only one who stayed when it mattered, and you destroyed that for him." I looked at her in the fading light. The woman who had decided years ago which child carried the legacy and which one did not. "I am not destroying anything," I said. "I am just done pretending the version you built still exists." She took one step back. "Then do not call. Do not come for holidays. You are not part of this family anymore." The words landed clean. No shock, no sharp pain. Just the final severing of something that had been fraying for a long time. "I won't," I said. "Take care of yourself." She turned and walked away. I watched until she disappeared around the bend, then picked up my bag and left the key at the front desk. The drive down the mountain was quiet. I stopped once for gas and replied to Sophia's text. "I'm okay. The audit will finish what we started. Thank you for standing with me." She answered quickly, "Always. Call when you're back in Denver. We'll figure out the next board call together." I reached the highway as full dark settled. The mountains stayed behind me, dark shapes against a darker sky. I did not feel victory. I felt the empty space where a family had been, and the strange steadiness of knowing I no longer had to negotiate my place inside it. In the weeks after the forensic review confirmed every transfer and every fabricated invoice, the partners voted to keep the restructured board. My mother and Ethan were removed from any operational role. The company continued under tighter oversight, but the version of the family that had run it for decades did not survive. I kept my shares and my seat. I did not take an operational position. Sophia moved into a larger role, and we worked together the way colleagues should. Clear expectations, honest communication, no hidden ledgers. My attorney, Claire Voss, handled the final paperwork and stayed on retainer for anything that came next. My mother never called. Ethan sent one message asking if I was happy with what I had done. I did not reply. 2 months later, I changed my number. The silence that followed was not the heavy waiting silence I had carried for years. It was final. I went back to my consulting work with a focus I had not felt in a long time. The shares provided stability, but they were not the point. The point was that I no longer measured my worth against people who had already decided I did not measure up. One weekend in early summer, I rented a small cabin in the foothills, not far from the retreat, but far enough that the roads did not lead back to it. Sophia came with her partner. We hiked the lower trails, cooked simple meals, and talked about work and books, and nothing that required defending. It felt easy, in a way family gatherings never had. On the last evening, I sat on the porch alone after they left. The light was fading over the hills. I thought about the 3 lines my mother had spoken on the deck that first morning, the ones that had drawn the final line between us. She had expected me to cross it the way I always had. I had not. The loss was real. I still felt the absence of a mother who would have chosen me without conditions. But I did not miss the version of myself that had waited for that choice. I had chosen myself instead. In the quiet that came after, there was room for people who chose me back without keeping score. That was the freedom. It was not loud. It was not triumphant. It was simply mine to keep. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever had to choose between keeping a version of family that required you to stay small and choosing the version of yourself that could finally stand up, what did you do? How did you live with the line once it was drawn? I would really like to know. Drop it in the comments.